Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so it is time for the top 20 champions videos. And as usual with top 20 champions videos, I do split them in two parts because these videos do tend to get quite long. Additionally, super important point, because there's always huge points of contention. Don't be that guy, please. We all see this game different. We all value different champions. We all, value more different game modes. I see the game one way and you will see it differently, and that is perfectly fine. Doesn't mean one is better than another. It means that, you care about different things. We might have different commitment or skill levels or engagement with the game or experience, and that is perfectly fine. And you can always express your thoughts in the comment section. Just, do it constructively. These lists are always a mixture of my own personal thoughts and opinions together with current game relevance and trends. And lists like this are especially difficult. At this point, we already have over 260 champions in the game, and to pick the 20 best, it's always going to be extremely situational. We're going to think which are the best champions, based again on our preferences, current metas, game modes, everything else. But I'll do my best to explain why I placed each champion where. We're going to start off with the old list. The old list, Kate and Fam were very new, so I included them in the list knowing that they will be great without understanding exactly how well they will do. We had spot hype going on at that point. We had Rintra, Warlock, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Ghost, Valkyrie, Gallen, Zorman, Nick Fury. Interestingly enough, some of these champions are very, very, very much so higher, and some of these champions do not feature on the list anymore at all. At the very least, a couple of them. And that is the nature of the game. The game ebbs and flows based on the demands, based on the content released. So let's first shout out a couple of champions that barely made the list, and this is going to be the point, barely didn't make the list. This is going to be where people go nuts already. The hardest champion to leave out of this was Valkyrie. Because she's amazing. She's great. She just hasn't had a very good time with the game for the last 4 or so months. I do think and hope that soon enough she will shine. It is not going to happen within the next month, but I do think in next 2-3 months maybe. Valkyrie could easily make this list again. I do expect her to make this list again. I do think this is a temporary setback for her, but I didn't want to cheat in this list and do the double positions, like these two champions get 20th and these two, so on and so forth. So somebody had to be left out, and unfortunately one of those champions is Valkyrie. The next point that everybody will start mentioning, and I want to be upfront about it, I made a mistake in my mutant list. And sometimes, hindsight is the best revealer of truth, I suppose. And I definitely made a mistake with my mutant list. Because I shortlisted about 25 champions which I thought should make this list, and then I had a job of eliminating about 5 of them. And the immediate champion I wanted to take out of this was the champion that I added at the top of the mutants list. So I had extremely hard time deciding the mutant top list because I didn't necessarily feel like any of those champions deserved the top spot, but I feel like I chose wrong. So I will go back to the mutant video and pin a comment saying that, I have demoted a specific champion, third or fourth. And that champion is, how do you guys think? Who is that champion? Kitty Pryde. This is quite wild to think, because Kitty Pryde did end up getting second spot previously, which, seemed right at the time because she was everywhere and she was blowing things up. And right now, Kitty Pryde is just almost nowhere. And hardly anybody that I see, that I play with, that I talk with, man, Kitty Pryde. I have spoken with way, way, way more people who are disappointed in the rank ups of Kitty Pryde. I've spoken with way more people who have ranked up, be that Iceman or Archangel or some other random mutant over Kitty Pryde, just because she doesn't it's quite a hard thing to explain. And everything there is on the papers that should make her great. But it's kind of the release of 7-star champions with her critting less, that affecting her more. It's kind of like the aggressive playstyle where things can go wrong. It's maybe her incompatibility with nodes and demands of the game. Again, I do think that potentially she could make it back up in the list, but right now, it just did not feel right to include her in the top 20 list. And rather than being stubborn and sticking with my guns, taking her out. And I'm gonna admit that I feel as if though I made a mistake placing Kitty as first in the mutant class, and she's out. Another champion that I really wanted to include, but I didn't, was Bishop. Perhaps there's a bit of personal bias because I do have rank 3. He nearly made it there. Obviously, there are more great champions that nearly made this list. But let's start with the champion that actually did. And in spot number 20, at the moment, I'm going to pick America Chavez. This, again, could be somewhat of a biased pick by some, because I do have a 7-star rank 3, and I did take my 7-star rank. She was one of my earlier 7-star rank 2s, and ultimately she is pretty much the 7-star that has worked out the best for me, be that defensively, offensively, be that in Battlegrounds, be that in Alliance War, be that in questing, and she's in right now. That's all I'm going to say. She does incredibly well, and I definitely have gotten a ton of use out of her. Again, with the AI issues and AI being as finicky as it is, it makes America Chavez that much more dangerous at the moment. That could be helping her. So maybe when Kabam fixes the AI, she will not be defensively as annoying and troublesome. But that definitely often, leads her to KOing all sorts of random opponents in different game modes. And offensively, she just answers plenty of the newest, the hardest threats in the game. Like, you can do Onslaught with her extremely well, you can do Maestro with her extremely well, you can do Future Ant-Man with her extremely well. She's very quick for Nick Fury, she's very quick for Rintra in most metas and so forth. And yeah, she has been surprisingly effective. And it is ridiculous at times. I think Michael yesterday against me did Onslaught with the energy resist node, which does slow her down and can hinder her. He did an Onslaught in like 26 seconds. As in like rank 3 Chavez, I think, against, or rank 2 Chavez against rank 5 6-star Onslaught. It was brutal. And some of the fights that she, again, it's just so crazy. Like, she's low-key one of the best at Tuma counters because of her regional level 2 as well. It's been quite wild with how powerful she has been, and I do think she deserves to be on this list. So we have America Chavez to start off with spot number 20. Spot number 19 goes to Ghost. And last video, I placed Ghost in spot number 15. So that was higher. That was 4 spots higher. And I got so much crap for it. I could not imagine you. There were genuine, I don't want to call them assholes, but trolls, nobbeds, who kept bringing that up for like 2 months. Every time I said something in a line chat, or every other time, or, every other stream, and it really got on my nerves. Because, yeah, I don't think Ghost is great. And I don't think I think Ghost is great. I don't think Ghost is that great for what we need in the game right now. And I think over these last 6 months, I have kind of been proven right. Most of the people that I play or talk with have the Ghost at rank 4. They don't necessarily rush to rank 5. And if they do have Ghost at rank 5, she skips out, a lot of metas. And even if she doesn't skip out of the Battlegrounds metas, she doesn't even get drafted all that much. And there are times, obviously, when Ghost shines, when we have some hazard shift lanes, when we have some other things happening. But if we are carrying from the point where we are primarily looking at Alliance War and Battlegrounds, and I'll give her Alliance War. Once you can put on an Indestructible 3 boost and a Power Back boost and Recall Masteries, yeah, she's an entirely different champion. And she is, one of the most banned champions there. I completely agree with that. Once you can completely bolster her up and get, the best version of her. But when you are forced to play your Ghost without Recall Masteries, without the boosts, without the safety net of Indestructible 3 boost, all that other stuff, all of a sudden a lot less people want to do it. And the same thing in quests. Like, we have had, many pieces of story content released. It's not like any of us were desperate to get Ghost. We have Necropolis. None of us can, again, bolster her up and run synergy. And I don't think I have seen her in Necropolis. at all. And she does have Alliance War. Yeah, for skilled players. And there are, you know, people who do well with Ghost in some other metas who do, you know, stay faithful. I'll completely admit to that. Overall, though, is she currently playing a bigger role than any of the champions above her in the game? I don't think so. Is she having like a massive impact on any of the game mode aside from Alliance War at the moment? I don't think so. And you know what? I'm sticking to it. If you are a Ghost fanatic, come at me. I'll take it. You know, leave all your nasty little comments. I just don't think she is that relevant in the game at the moment. Obviously, she's plenty relevant to make it on the list. I just don't think she is, you know, your top 5 or the best champion in game or anything like that. I think this is a very reasonable position for her based on what I experience in the game on daily basis. Moving on, another tech champion, that's Nimrod. I talked about Nimrod a lot in my tech rankings video, and Nimrod is kind of putting himself out of the job at the moment because Kabam did a very, very poor judgment call creating Nimrod, because the Nimrod was basically the beginning of tech class laying out the entire mutant class with like one exception, right? And at that time, mutants were popular. Mutants were a big deal. Nimrod came, and all of a sudden, mutants were a liability. And because of that, mutants are ranked less, mutants are used less. Kabam obviously also didn't release many mutants, so they have just been kind of like overtaken. And this is where we're at now. He's the best at what he does, just what he does isn't as important right now in the game. And existence of him is a massive threat. His actual kind of like use desirability is less so. It's kind of lagging behind right now. And here we have the problem, because he lays out the mutant class, the best. He's like the best counter to mutant champions overall, I'd say. And then Kabam's kind of stuck with the mutant class. And especially stuck with the mutant class in relation to Nimrod. They effectively have to invent a completely new identity for mutants because of this champion. Because if they release, you know, let's say dual purpose or defensive oriented champions that are not completely protected against this guy, they're screwed. You know, the champion automatically is not going to have much of a value. There will be very few people who are interested in, you know, taking a 7-star whatever to rank 3 if they can be nuked by Nimrod of like 2 ranks below. And as an end result, having Nimrod is insanely important. Having him at the highest rank and bringing him along always is not as important anymore. And that's the reality, because people have, you know, kind of shied away from mutant girls because of Nimrod and some other champions that have been released consecutively. And wish I could place him high. He used to be high. But again, he's best at what he does, just that what he does is not in demand at the moment. So that's why Nimrod is at spot number 18. Spot number 17 is CGR. And I think this is a perfectly fine spot for him, because he's damage. He's damage personified. He's a nuke. And he will have times when he works. He will have times when he doesn't. I think compared to many of the other nukes, the upside is potentially bigger and faster and, you know, stronger. The use case scenarios haven't been as frequent. We have had a lot of metas where Mystic champions and Science champions are getting buffed. He doesn't necessarily do that well against those. And then we have had plenty of metas, coincidentally, partially because of the same reasons, where buffs are getting punished or debuffs are getting purified, or there's something else that does hold up his playstyle. And we always knew that. CGR has a lot of conditions for him to work. You need to be able to finish your combos. You need to be able to access your special attacks freely. You need to be able to have relatively free access to all of your buffs, and you need to be able to stick all of your debuffs and stuff like that. All of those are things that you do need to keep in mind, but he just works enough to make it on this list. He does enough and works plenty of times, and there are plenty of meta matchups that he does absolutely destroy. Therefore, he of course deserves to be in top 20. Therefore, he of course is one of the most dangerous champions, fast and best options to have at appropriate situations. But again, those will be limited. Those will be affected by the requirements in order to access what he does. The reason why he is here is because he's the fastest athlete. Realistically, for the kind of like mid-length fight or short to mid-length fight, he is pretty much the fastest and highest damage output champion in the game. He's not the fastest champion, in super short fights. We're going to be looking at guaranteed crits there and very good base stat damage without the necessity to drop a level 2. He's not necessarily the fastest champion for super long fights. You might be looking at some, sustainable ramp-up champions there. But there is a length of the fight where he's just absolutely the highest damage output champion. Again, I do think the fact that we might not see him as a 7-star for a while will eventually, hinder his popularity. I do think it has already had perhaps a slight impact. But at this current point in the game, 6-star rank 5 Ascended CGR is just about as scary and deadly opponent as you will see anywhere. So, he's still on the list. Speaking of some of the most danger overall, we have Juggernaut. And my personal title for Juggernaut is he's the best Battlegrounds offensive champion whenever he can be used. I think he does most of the important matchups, and in any meta where he works, he always is an insane level of threat. He does core pretty much the fastest or second fastest, and then he does, your feature Ant-Mans, and he can do a Tuma taking very little damage back, and obviously he nukes Nick Fury insanely fast, and he can do your Killmongers, he can do most of the champions from most of the classes pretty much. Most of the relevant fights, I'm going to put it like that. And it's one of those situations where if he can get a suitable matchup, most of the time, you're going to win that round using him, or you're going to lose that round going up against him, unless, there's a big mistake that happens. Because what makes him as good, specifically for Battlegrounds, is the fact that he's also super simple to use, super reliable, and super tanky, and there's very little RNG involved. So he gets to his level 2 quicker than an average nuke champion as well, because of increased combat power rate. And if you happen to have some buffs in that fight, that's helpful, obviously, as well. You can afford yourself some chip damage due to Relic, and then you're going to regen it all back. And the man puts in work. And one of the best things about Juggernaut, in my opinion, he has been putting in work in other game modes as well recently. Like, we're using him for his immunity to reverse controls, for the final phase Grandmaster. And with that, people have been using him in a couple of other fights along the way as a solid option or as a team revive feeder. He's one of the kind of best, more casual questing champions as well for a ton of quests, because, again, of how easy it is to use him and how fast he can finish the fights. And my man is getting all the love from MCOC community right now in many different game modes. And it's quite obvious why. He's enjoyable. He's super fast. He's super reliable, and he does what is needed to be done right now in the game. Speaking of that, we have Tigra, and I think Tigra is overall the best Mystic offensive champion, because Tigra obviously is crazy good for Battlegrounds too, but Tigra is crazy good for Alliance War, and Tigra is crazy good for plenty of the challenge fights. The difference is that there is more risk involved with playing her. There is a higher skill requirement with playing her. And it is also absolutely 100% worth ranking her, learning her, investing in her. She's one of my next Ascension candidates as well, strongly considering that. Just because of how many of the hard and crazy matchups she can take, including some of the new ones like Maestro and Onslaught and whatnot. And I don't think there is too much at this point to be said about Tigra. If you are skeptical, do definitely invest in her. She is a champion that will improve your skill level for sure. She is a champion that will perform miracle fights for you at times as well, especially when you get going. She is a champion that will screw you over in fights that you have not practiced before. That is kind of the downside. But the upside is you don't need to know how to use Tigra in every fight. You need to know your key matchups. You need to, quickly test a fight or two before you use her in Alliance War and stuff like that, and you can just pick her up as you go. I think one of the things that is scaring people away from Tigra, and therefore benefiting from how awesome and amazing she is, it is the fact that people look at learning Tigra as this like massive monumental task. It's not like that. You just need to learn the basics more or less, and then you need to learn individual matchups one at a time, and then you split that huge workload into bits, and it makes it a lot easier. There are obviously some unfortunate things happening with Tigra, as she was higher on the list previously, and that is the fact that, Kabami is releasing quite a few champions now with the build accuracy immunity or neutralize immunity and stuff, or having nodes that, kind of effectively are gimping neutralize. Neutralize is a very interesting ability where when Kabam released the neutralize, the champions with it were so powerful that we started getting counters to that, like specific counters to neutralize. And now we don't have many neutralized champions in the game. There is only 4, right? I believe there's 4, maybe 5. But all of them are at the very least, all but one, all except one of them are at the very least, very good to absolutely amazing and excellent. And yeah, that definitely has been noted that neutralize is getting kind of like slowed down a bit. Speaking of champions that are getting slowed down a bit, we have another champion that has slid down a few positions, and that is Nick Fury to spot number 14. Nick Fury used to be much higher in this list. And again, it is more so a case of him going from a complete package at one point in time in the game, where he was perfect for Alliance Wars, he was perfect for questing, he was, good and solid for AQ, he was crazy good for all of these different things. He was one of the horsemen of Abyss of Legends as well. And he was just everywhere. And therefore, at the time, he definitely seemed like a perfect skill champion, definitely seemed like a champion who deserves to be at the very top of the game. And now, there's less of it. So we are only primarily benefiting from only one aspect of Nick Fury, which is his defense. That is not to say he's not an insane offensive champion, which a lot of people try to forget these days, which is something, I like reminding people at times. Because he can be still offensively great even in his first life, because he does have a ton of stuff in his kit, and if you do have Deep Wounds Mastery, his damage is more than acceptable. Obviously, we all know that the busted side of him comes when you destroy Life Model Decoy, and that's not necessarily as compatible of a game plan or strategy with Battlegrounds, or if you do want to benefit from that, it will require some impeccable timing, which can be risky. But it can be a sort of a Hail Mary win condition as well. Ultimately, I think this is where Nick Fury belongs. We still see him every day in the game. We still use him offensively in Alliance War here and there, in other quests, but it's nowhere near as much of an offensive use as he once saw. And as a defender, he still has his dangers, without doubt. Even though we have a lot of super high damage output champions that time-wise can take him down relatively quickly, we need to remind ourselves that Nick Fury is not necessarily an easy fight always, because, an ill-timed level 1 from Nick Fury can completely mess you up, because he's going to go unblockable and he's going to knock you down, and then if you are relying on any debuffs, those will get purified and you're going to get slowed down in the fight. And all that other stuff it does add, the fact that he is stun immune in his second life, and you might need to block bait a heavy attack and thus take chip damage from him. He still is very relevant and dangerous as a defender, even if you don't necessarily count the extra amount of health that he gets. But that does help, let's face it. So, I think Nick Fury is perfectly fine there. And I think together, in between Nimrod, Ghost, CGR, Nick Fury, and Dr. Doom being lower. That's right, Dr. Doom's spot number 13 at the moment. I think that serves as a proof that we are effectively entering a new age of the game. Because all of these champions that I listed, Nick Fury, Dr. Doom, Nimrod, CGR, right? And again, we can even extend that to like Kitty Pryde, and a handful of other champions, they were at the top of the game, at the TP top of the game at one point. They were the best of the best this game had to offer. And they didn't get magically worse. Just like Dr. Doom hasn't gotten magically worse. This is like the best way for me to try and explain that more so about what is required, what is important, and what your priorities are. And it always has been. And that's why these lists are controversial. That's why they are subjective. If you are very, very casual in Alliance War and Battlegrounds, your list would inevitably look completely different, and Dr. Doom would be super high up there, and, Tigra might not even be there, and, some other champions would take the place. But these champions have been pushed out of the top, in my eyes, and most of the other competitive players' eyes, because we need different things. We need different abilities because different champions have been released. Kabam is utilizing different nodes. The game modes themselves are imposing like specific requirements from these champions. And regardless of how amazing Dr. Doom is, and in a vacuum, I would say that Dr. Doom is still the best champion in the game. Like in a vacuum type of environment. Sorry, best Mystic champion in the game. In a vacuum type of environment where, if you cared about Act 8 the most, or Act 7, and stuff like that. He's amazing. His stats are amazing. His ability set is amazing. His playstyle is great. The chunkiness, the power control, buff control, access to different types of dot effects, stealing the power gain and being super cheesy champion in separate matchups. Again, the safeties that you get using Dr. Doom, putting opponents, in kind of like the Doom cycle, which lets you feel completely in control of the fight, and knowing that you can eat a hit and it will pretty much never crit and you'll be fine with just a little bit of a chip damage. You're not going to get KO'd. All those things are amazing. It's just not as effective anymore. It's just not what defensive champions necessarily always need. It's just not, what we need on offense, what he delivers. Because he's just perhaps not quite fast enough at times. He's just not doing what we need him to do at times, and not countering the abilities of the most relevant defenders enough. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good that the game moves from one thing to another, and we always have old champions making their comebacks. Some champions seem to be immortal and always stay relevant, and there will be champions that go up and down and sometimes stay down and sometimes go back up after a while. And that's where we're at. And that's how I look at Dr. Doom right now. I love him. I think he's amazing. But with this set of tier lists, I'm more so trying to answer the question, which of these champions deserve the rank up materials more? Which of these champions I would more likely rank up? Which of these champions I would more likely recommend other people rank up, depending on what they care for in the game? And therefore, we have a new set of top tier options, many of whom are very recent champions because they have been purpose-built for what the game requires right now. Like a lot of 2023 champions have been purpose-built for like Battlegrounds or Alliance War, and it shows. That's why they're effective there. That's why we care about it. And Battlegrounds at the moment, together with Alliance War, are like the premium game modes. And Dr. Doom been built for something else. And that something else is just not as relevant anymore. So I hope that explains this part well enough. Moving on, Archangel. And Archangel's more or less in the same place. Really, there isn't that much of a difference. He has slid down a couple spots, and that's not necessarily because there's anything wrong with him. He's exactly the same as he was. He's exactly the same as he always has been. Whatever he does is and has been and will be in fashion because he's the best at it. If opponent can be bled and poisoned, they are going down. And that I don't think I can say much about Archangel. Like, obviously, he's used in every single game mode. Doesn't have the broadest list of matchups, but it kind of says a lot when any new champion gets released. One of the first things that we go and check whether we can Archangel him. Come on, admit it. Whenever a new champion comes out that's even potentially remotely decent defender, one of the very first things that we are checking is, can I AA that? There's a reason for it, right? Because it's super easy, super effective, super simple, super fast, and that's it. Job's done. And that's still the case. There are more and more champions that we can't really Archangel. At the same time, there are more champions that we can. And I think unless Kabam puts in a deliberate effort of releasing the toughest defenders that you absolutely cannot Archangel, kind of seems, to be honest, like this year he has taken a bit on the nose in terms of matchups, because we have had Maestro that has the immunity. We have Onslaught, which you can Archangel, by the way, not as easy. You'll take some damage, and we have had like Fam, against very potent in defense that you can't AA. So there are some very, very tough champs that this season we cannot Archangel, but still, whenever you can do a fight with him, he's just brutal. And again, unless Kabam puts in a very, very, very deliberate effort in stopping him, he'll be present, he'll be active, he'll be desired, he'll be ranked, and he will be answered for a lot of problems. So, spot number 12. And the final champion in this list is Gallen. And Gallen as well, when he initially came out, obviously he got insane hype, which was justified, and he's a crazy good champion. He is, a solid defender, especially if boosted in some of the metas. Kind of wish he had more HP though, but whatever. Offensively, he's built for short, medium fights. He's good for like AQ fights, he's good for AW fights, he's good for Battlegrounds fights. He's not good for like the biggest health pools in 8.3, for instance, or Necropolis, something like that. 8.3 bosses, unless there's something that enables some sort of Gallen cheese factor, he's not going to be particularly great for that, typically. And similar thing, nobody's bringing Gallen to Necropolis. He's built for specific things, and this is exactly what I was talking about when I was addressing Dr. Doom. What he is built for is needed, is relevant, is, currently in demand. And when he came out, there was this debate, who's better, Hulkling or Gallen? I think we have solved that question. I think Hulkling has kind of run away with it a bit. But that is no, bad feedback to Gallen. It's just, more good feedback to Hulkling. Gallen is exactly what we thought he is going to be. He still functions tremendously well for a ton of champions. Again, one more of those champions, which again I need to bring up in Cosmic class, where if he's not going to get released as a 7-star, that will be something that does hold him back, and eventually will make him slide down the list and perhaps even be irrelevant, because there is a set limit to his max detonation, which is kind of his selling point, because once you detonate, if you don't KO your opponent, it can often be a whole another thing and completely stretched out fight, or unwinnable fight if you cannot destroy it in one go. But at the moment, he's putting in work. There's no other way to say it. He is putting in a lot of work. He's also one of the very, very few, if not the only Mystic champion that's properly immune to Nullify. And that has been playing a huge role, especially with how much Kabam apparently loves some sort of buff-eating nodes and buff punishment for us. And obviously, Gallen has often been pretty much the only Cosmic champion that functions normally, or even better than normally, because of those immunities. And therefore, Gallen's in spot number 11 at the moment. That is pretty much it. So we can go back to this list. This is how it used to look like. And this is how it looks now. Gallen, Archangel, Dr. Doom, Nick Fury, Tigra, Juggernaut, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Nimrod, Ghost, Chavez. Again, I did make a mistake in the mutant list. Just so everybody's aware, Kitty Pryde will not appear in this video. And I think rightfully so. The more I started thinking about these placements, the more I started thinking about, which champions got. It did not feel right to put Kitty above any of these, let alone the champions that did make it to top 10. And yeah, Valkyrie almost made it, Bishop, plenty of other champions that are that close. And for you individually, obviously, you can swap things around. Obviously, you will again find different champions deserving more so than I do. But this is where I stand. So stay tuned for the second part of this, where I will go over top 10 champions in the entire game right now, in my opinion. But that is it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about